We are joined by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, talking about these hearings that took place yesterday with Attorney General Garland. We also had Christopher Wray sit down with an interview with Brett Baer and talk about some of these decisions by the FBI, the politicization and weaponization of these two departments at the highest levels. And I'm going to play this sound, then we'll go right to Secretary Pompeo. But this is Senator Mike Lee questioning Merrick Garland about the all of the protest and vandalizing that went on at pro-life pregnancy centers, and ultimately they put up a $25,000 reward. Like, they couldn't find these people on their own. Take a listen to the question and the response.
In 2022 and for the first couple of months of 2023, DOJ has announced charges against 34 individuals for blocking access to or vandalizing abortion clinics. And there have been over 81 reported attacks on pregnancy centers, 130 attacks on Catholic churches since the leak of the Dobbs decision, and only 2 individuals have been charged. So how do you explain this disparity by reference to anything other than politicization of what's happening there?
The FACE Act applies equally to efforts to damage, blockade clinics, whether whether they are a pregnancy resource center or whether they are an abortion center. It applies equally in both cases, and we apply the law equally. I will say you're quite right. There are many more prosecutions with respect to the blocking of the abortion centers, but that is generally because those actions are taken with photography at the time, during the daylight, and seeing the person who did it is quite easy.
Okay, this is the federal. Mr. Secretary, you ran the CIA. This is the Attorney General of the United States saying basically we can't find the people that are violating and blowing up abortion crisis pregnancy centers around the country because it happens at night, as if there's no cameras or surveillance material. I mean, this was a pathetic performance. All he kept saying was, Mr. Secretary, all I know is, which I've concluded all he knows is not much.
Yeah, I saw a good deal of that testimony yesterday. It was really weak and doesn't begin to account for the discrepancy in how they're doing this enforcement. Jay, this is almost certainly the data supports that these are political decisions being made by senior leaders on how to prosecute, who to prosecute. It is not the absence of camera. It's not the time of day that these things are taking place. This is a decision being built and filtered through the bureaucracy in the Department of Justice and perhaps at the FBI as well about which cases are more important to them. And these are not pro-life people. These are folks who have supported the abortion movement for an awfully long time in their political lives and in the rest of their lives. And this is now emanating in our most sacred space, this important space where we're supposed to do equal justice under the law. I thought his performance yesterday both reflected the politicization of the Attorney General's office and was not representative of the best things that America knows need to happen. It's indecent what he said yesterday.
You know, Secretary Pompeo, when you hear this kind of just, we can't do it, it's late at night, the other response was, well, I don't really have anything to do with those FBI agents that showed up at that pro-life activist store, and I think that was the safest practice, FBI with 20 guns drawn. It seems like whoever is the next president has got a mess to clean up at the DOJ and FBI. How serious is that mess? And I think people want to see it cleaned up. They want an effective FBI and an effective DOJ to be doing the right thing. But they know it's not doing that right now, and we know how hard the bureaucracy fights back against anyone who tries to make changes.
Jordan, it'll be a death struggle because this is at the core of their capacity to wield power in ways that reflect their point of view, their political preferences. The next president's got to get after this in a serious way, not just with the most senior leadership, but rooting this out, root and branch throughout the bureaucracies inside both the FBI and the Department of Justice. Look, we know, Jordan, there's good FBI agents out there working the streets, doing good work. We know there's folks at DOJ that are just trying to prosecute even-handedly. But the folks making the decisions, and to say, gosh, I didn't know or I couldn't know, you're the Attorney General of the United States of America. Yep. That is an inadequate response to a question from a serious dissenter who was simply trying to get the facts and to have people treated equally under the law.
Yeah, especially coming in a case where when they went to trial and brought in their lead DOJ lawyer on free access to clinics entrances, so handles all the abortion prosecutions, the jury found the gentleman that was charged not guilty after he had 27 FBI agents surrounding his house the year and a half of 18 months before. I mean, it's absurd, quite frankly, and I appreciate your view on this. Let me ask you this. Chris Wray's been in the news a lot. He made a statement yesterday in his interview with Brett Baer that it's the FBI's position that the origin of COVID likely came from the lab in Wuhan. We've seen that also now from the Department of Energy and some other agencies as well. The White House, on the other hand, is still resisting, and I understand it could be up for. Obviously, it's a big issue and has got geopolitical ramifications. That's what I want to focus on. What is the geopolitical play on this? Because the White House, obviously, it's clear they do not want to tag this as a leak out of a lab.
Yeah, look, the facts are clear. Since March of 2020, 3 years ago now, when I said this almost certainly came from a lab. Now everyone can see it. Every intelligence agency is going to make the same conclusion that is the near certain probability. The reason they're walking away from that is because once you say that this came from the Chinese lab, you know that Xi Jinping would have known about this. We know that then the cover-up was connected to that. And that requires holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable, actually imposing real costs on them for the millions of lives lost, the billions of dollars in wealth that was destroyed. So it's a political statement for National Security Advisor Sullivan to say, hey, there's no consensus on this, is a statement that is trying to kick this can down the road, probably trying to figure out how to get through the next 2 years without having to deal with this very serious matter that we now know to be near certain. Xi Jinping knew that there was a lab leak. He covered it up and sent this virus around the world, and we all know the results of that.
So what does accountability look like? We hear that often with even the war in Ukraine. If China arms Russia with any weapons that can be used for deadly force, they're already sending over some non-deadly tactical items. But if they do that, there will be consequences. In the case of the COVID situation, what would consequences look like?
Well, goodness, there's multiple things, Jordan, and it's the right question. First, there's certainly government action that can be taken. Don't forget this lab, this Wuhan Institute of Virology is still open, still doing science and research. I pray no longer American money in there doing it, but getting that thing shut down is a governmental task. Second, there should be financial consequences for the decision makers and for the Chinese Communist Party. And I know you folks at the ACLJ, you guys have done great work on cases just like this before. I hope everyone listening understands that. I'm sure you all are thinking about a strategy to go hold accountable financially those who imposed real financial costs on Americans. This wasn't some far-off problem for us. We all lived it. We all experienced it. People lost jobs. Families were hurt. And there are remedies for that in the U.S. court systems and, frankly, in international systems as well. And then finally, I think it tells us a lot about what we've already known about international organizations. The World Health Organization failed in its single mission. Xi Jinping was able to manipulate the United Nations in a way, and we should make sure that the Chinese Communist Party pays in those places as well by kicking them out of those institutions that caused so much death and destruction about an intentional decision from Xi Jinping.
You're speaking today at CPAC. What are you going to tell the conservatives in attendance? What's going to be the theme?
Remember, America's counting on conservatives to take this nation forward. The core ideas that we have known, Jay, that you've worked on, the ACLJ has worked on for decades, these are the right principles to build America back to the right place, whether it's the Wuhan virus, whether it's an attorney general that is prosecuting ways that are deeply unfair. The way you get this back is by hard-nosed conservatism that understands American greatness, never apologizes, and always works to put the American people in the front of everything they do, whether it's abroad or here at home.
Very good. Mike Pompeo, of course, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs for the ACLJ, former Secretary of State, Director of the CIA. Mike, thanks as always.